Hey everyone, so if you didn't know, this podcast is a two-parter and this is part 2. We felt like there was a lot of good stuff in this conversation, so we didn't want to cut anything out, but we did split it into 2 episodes instead of just having one beast of an episode. So this is part 2, like I said, so if you didn't listen to part 1, go back and check it out, because that conversation leads us into this one really, really well.
So how long have we technically been in this quarantine at this point?
Well, what do you
2
define
weeks,
as quarantine?
right?
Yeah, I guess working from home time, about 2 weeks.
2 weeks for me, but it's been, 3 for you? 3
Almost,
or 4?
Yeah, 3-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I guess, thinking back 2 weeks ago to now, Hannah, you mentioned that you've felt challenged in a couple of key places, like being very list oriented, trying to check things off, get things done. Rachel, you mentioned about how more important some of your previous rhythms like walks and those things are. I guess my question to you guys would be, has the way you view or approach God changed at all over the past 2 weeks? Like, do you find that, coming to him in prayer in a different way, has that changed at all, or just in general, spiritually, what's changed?
What's different,
if anything?
With the coronavirus, what's different about your habits?
I don't know. I feel like they're more important because I feel the weight of them a little bit more right now. I guess I find myself more just refocusing throughout the day if I start to feel anxious or overwhelmed by something, just reminding myself that, like, God is God over all of this. Like, he knows, he is. I keep just having in my prayers, like, reminding myself that his hand is on all of this, and that it's not about me. It's not about, it's not my job to control all of this and to worry about all of this, because over all of it, he's in control, which sometimes was my daily reminder with school, if school would get out of control and feel overwhelming. But I feel like that's been really grounding for me and something that is more of a daily thing right now, whereas maybe before it wouldn't have been such a big focus.
How do you do that though? Because I find it really hard when I'm feeling anxious or freaked out in a moment. Being able to step away to refocus is really hard to do. So how do you do that? How do you take that time or pull yourself away to take the time to refocus?
I don't know. I think most of the time that would happen like during my walk or something where things feel a little bit slower and I can breathe a little bit easier. Where I'm walking and I'm just reminding myself that because I'm separating from what I was doing before. But if it's like I'm just here feeling it, maybe like doing something for school, I think I have to say it out loud or I just have to say it to myself. And that's been something that I've done more now than before, where like school, if things got really out of control, there was so much going on that I think my mind, like I couldn't even stop sometimes to think through those words. Whereas now I'm doing things in this quiet space and it might feel really crazy and overwhelming in my head, but it's so quiet and calm near me that I can just stop and realize like I need to say these things to myself to remind myself. I think it's easier right now just because of that like completely quiet space around me.
It sounds like
really
it's
good.
especially important right now to take time to allow, which, like we said, there's a lot of opportunity for this, but we need to allow there to be space, and we need to create that space to just sit in silence and be with God and meditate on some of those truths about him. Like, hey, he's in control. He has power over this virus. He has power over the stress, the anxiety, the storms. It sounds like that, like meditation, that silence, that separation, which is easier to do now, but you have to be intentional about it, right? You have to carve it out of your schedule, because they will fill up.
Yeah, I mean, and I just add it at the end of every prayer that I have right now, at the beginning of the day. And I feel like that sets the tone then as just a reminder for me, because I'm focused during my prayer, but then later on during the day, I might not be quite so focused, but I can remember what I said at the beginning of the day, which is still true. It's just in a different place and time.
Yeah. What about you guys?
I've been reading this book, subtle plug, called Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen, who is just an amazing woman of God. And it's all about kind of reclaiming your thoughts and putting on the mind of Christ. And I think it's just to like even complement what you were saying, Rachie, like actively taking control of those like individual thoughts. So like you're feeling overwhelmed, right? And like that's usually guided by some kind of a fear, like, you know, I'm not going to be a good teacher, or like these kids are gonna feel alone, or you know, I'm not going to be a good wife, or the world is going to end, or, you know, whatever your fear is, like intentionally naming it, saying like, okay, this is my thought. This is what I'm thinking right now is true. As like, even in the midst, I described it to Adam yesterday as like, sometimes my brain feels like, in Peanuts, pig pen, he's got like all those black swirls around him, you know, I'm like, but that's my brain.
Such a great description. Oh my gosh.
Just like the swirls.
My brain too.
And so like reaching in there and saying, and like plucking one of those strands and saying, okay, this is, I'm feeling overwhelmed, but this is the thought that I'm actually thinking. This is the fear. And then it's like, okay, is this true? Like, are my students alone? No, they're not. Right? Like, what does God say? Like, God says, like, you know, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Like, I've known
Sorry,
you
I wasn't
since
laughing
were
at
in your
you.
mother's
Our cat just put her face in the lamp, and it was hilarious. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I don't remember, but
Well, you were talking about
So like, yeah, is it true? What does God say? But then like, you have to choose to believe it, right? Like, and like, it's so easy to walk through those first 3 steps of like, okay, yep, this is my fear. No, I guess it's not true. This is what God says about me. But like, I so often will be like, okay. And then I just like keep thinking, and you know, like instead of like, no, I'm actually going to believe that. And like, I think that's where creating that space to like, kind of walk through that and say, no, God, like, I'm going to believe what you've said is true. Like that you hold, like you are sovereign and in authority, and like nothing surprises you. Like in the big scale things to like my individual insecurities and like, you know,
that's really
fears
good
in this season.
That's really
And I think one thing that's like important to like remember when you're doing that sort of like meditation thing, or that just like taking captive those truths and trying to let those sink in, is like sometimes like you do it once and it doesn't do a whole lot necessarily. Like it doesn't necessarily feel like a whole lot has changed, but like I think that's something that over time it compounds and creates I think renewal over time. So
new thought pattern, like you have to literally change your brain in a lot of these things,
right,
you know?
Right. That
and
takes
the more
tries.
you travel that mental path, like the more ingrained it becomes.
Absolutely.
Even physically in your brain.
Yeah,
definitely.
No, it is a literal. I think that's. I'm glad you mentioned that, Will, and Hannah, you're totally right, because it is both. It is a spiritual. There's a spiritual transformation happening when you engage in that kind of a practice, but there is a very physical transformation happening as well. That's literally how your brain works. If you run those synapses over and over again, over time that pathway becomes the natural pathway that your brain travels. And the enemy does such a good job of this.
Pre-med major.
Please, no. But
if you need an emergency operation, he has his undergrad in biology.
Oh my gosh. literally know nothing. I know nothing. But yeah, no, it's the enemy does such a good job of wooing us towards these really negative thought patterns that don't feel like it at first.
Yeah.
They're just easier to say. It's just so much easier to say, man, like, I'm awful. I'm worthless. And like, in a really twisted way, like, it feels good to say it because you're like, almost like, you've put it in.
You say it
words.
before somebody else
Exactly,
does.
yeah,
Or
exactly.
before God does.
Yep.
That's always your fear, right?
But
That's not who he is.
But if you do that too much, you start to believe it too much. And it is so much. It's so important to fight that battle, to take those thoughts captive. You know.
This sounds like another conversation.
No,
You know?
podcast episode.
Yeah, like I feel like we could talk about this for a long
we
time.
could.
absolutely.
really
Yeah.
Well, on that note, are there something that we want to do at the end of each episode is we want to come up with like 2 or 3 concrete steps and something that like our listeners can walk away with and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I can do, because we want to empower and encourage them. We want to give them the steps, the next step that they can do and that we can do, you know, after talking about this. What can we take away? Unless you have something else you wanted to add, Adam, I think, you know, now we can kind of come up with what are those 2 to 3 concrete next steps we can create.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. I've just been taking notes as we've been going along, just to refresh all of our minds, because we've covered a lot of ground here. So
Yeah.
Shocking. You guys should sit down at a normal like Friday night dinner with the 4 of us, and it's basically
oh my gosh, yeah.
this on
Let's just
steroids.
start recording those.
Yeah.
That would be the most entertaining 3 to 4 hour long
Yeah.
long form podcast of all time. Maybe we'll do that someday. That could be fun.
Yeah, maybe. And then you'll hear like,
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Yeah. Or Will digging into the M&M.
the M&M
that's right.
bowl.
They have a bowl of M&Ms and I go nuts.
They're Wills.
So
they're really
some
just
notes
for
I have down. The importance of continuing previously grounded rhythms. Rachel, you mentioned having a bucket list on top of new rhythms as well has been helpful for you. Definitely putting God first is something we talked a lot about. Creating physical space, Hannah, for you, using your Bible, however you can take that extreme intentionality to put God first. Rachel, taking walks, taking time away to give gratitude is something you mentioned as well. Taking that time to refocus, sort of planning that time to refocus as well. Speaking these things out loud and repeating them too. So yeah, maybe if we can just pick 3 really specific tangible takeaways out of this discussion, what would you guys say are the biggest things for you?
I think so. Like this whole conversation has reminded me of this verse in Romans that I think kind of like sums it up. Like Paul kind of sums it up, where he's talking about love and how it must be sincere, and he kind of like lists all these things, and it could be kind of overwhelming. This is in Romans 12, but then he says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer." And I think like a lot of these things fall into those categories, like, you know, joyful in hope, like we're practicing gratitude, we're still celebrating things, you know. Patient in affliction, like giving yourself grace in this like really weird season. But then being faithful in prayer, like those spiritual rhythms, like maintaining those, keeping those up, like digging into maybe even new spiritual practices, like that maybe you haven't had time for. And like, I don't know, I think a lot of those things kind of fall into those 3 categories of like,
Totally,
you know, joyful in hope, patient in
perfectly.
affliction, faithful in prayer.
Can you repeat that verse for the
It's
listeners?
Romans 12:12.
Got it.
And that whole like Romans 12:9 through 13 is kind of like a really good, I think, passage for right now, because it goes on to talk about practicing hospitality, which I think is really important in this season, but like totally looks different when you can't have people in your house. But, you know, joyful and hope, patient affliction, faithful and prayer.
So if we were to translate that verse over into 3 like very specific things we can do this week, what would that be? So the first one is joyful and hope. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So
I think practicing gratitude, like maybe
it's like start a gratitude journal or something like that.
Yeah,
like
gratitude journal, or even like you're bored.
A thing a day. Yeah.
So
write down something you're thankful for every day.
Yeah, I was gonna say even just a note in your phone is easy.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. All right. So writing down at least one thing a day that we're thankful for. I like that. And then the second was patient in affliction.
Patient in affliction. Yeah. It's hard to like put that into like an action step of like be patient, or maybe give yourself some grace. Yeah, like for this new routine, whether that's working from home, whether that's like you know,
I like that.
In your relationship with your spouse who you're like trapped with, or not trapped with, lovingly enclosed, or your kids, you know, like
oh my gosh, I can't imagine having kids right now.
Gosh, no.
It looks so different.
I love kids,
bless all the parents.
Man, like we're like, man, this is kind of like a staycation, you know, and they're probably like, no, it's not.
Yeah, bless all the parents.
Yeah, I would say that all of these steps and just this conversation fits really well with where we're at with all of this. But like for other people that may be listening, it could look completely different.
Yeah,
like if you're working or if you've lost your job, like there's so many different things that you could be experiencing. And this we're very blessed to be in the position that we are, to be able to be home together and to all 4 of us still have our jobs
still get paid.
Be working kind of still, like all of those things we're really, really blessed to be experiencing. So when you're listening to this, if you're not in that position, like we can sound like we're taking it for granted a little bit.
Right.
But
we don't want to make all this stuff sound
where
easier
we're
than
at.
it is.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're just sharing our
routine.
experiences and like what's working for us, but it could look very different for
and
other
I mean,
people.
I think a lot of this stuff is important, you know, regardless of where you're at. But like you said, it's going to look different.
Right.
And you might have to, that patient in affliction part might be like, I have to be patient and trust God when I don't have a job and I don't know
or
what's
someone
next.
you know is sick or something.
Yeah, and that's hard. And that's hard. So if we could turn that into a step, it might be like maybe it could be, you know, showing yourself grace. Show yourself grace this week. Forgive yourself of you know, not getting up at the time you wanted to get up at. And then I think it could also look at like some of that meditation stuff that we talked about, like just creating space no matter what dark situation you're in, and set that aside for just a moment and just remember how good God is. You know, meditate on, you know, like I'm doing a meditation with my students this week, Luke chapter 8, 22 through 25, and it's Jesus calming the storm. And it's like the disciples are scared for their life. And the boat is filling up with water. The waves are, you know, tossing them back and forth. And they say, Jesus, like, we're going to die, man. And he's like, chill. And the storm's like, calm, you know. And I think that's a reminder that Jesus has power over this. Our prayer has power over this. Every time we go to God, that has power over the storms in our lives that are going on right now. And I think meditating on that, on that truth. And even if when you're done meditating, even if you really have trouble believing that, I think that is going to be helpful. But
so good.
That, you know, I don't know. I'm not in that situation.
So good. That's so good. And then what was our third one?
Faithful in prayer. Yeah. I think
Pray
that's like a lot of those rhythms we've talked about, right? You know? Like
Prayer
being
journal.
faithful, like just show up. Like I even think about this with like my own like health journey, where it's just like, just show up.
Yeah.
Just show up. Even if like it wasn't, even if you know, fatigue before you did the day before, just keep showing up.
Right.
And like, and then there's that eventually has payout. Like it, you know, it doesn't have to be like this crazy experience with God every time.
Yep.
Like, but just keep showing up. Like, gosh, if I only like sat with you when we were having like a really deep, intimate moment, like
You'd never sit with me.
no. But you know what I mean? Like it's just being with someone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That lets
Yeah.
you know them and be known, and so just keep showing up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now in this time, that means show up every day.
Yeah.
That show up every single day. It is so important to do that.
So like show up
and-
to do that time with God at the very least, and that's a start. Is that what we're
Yeah.
saying?
Exactly.
And I think even taking that literally too, of being faithful to pray for our nation, those who are sick, like our
Yeah.
government officials, you know,
Yeah.
our students, our coworkers. Like there's so many opportunities
Yeah.
in this season for conversation that, like spiritual conversation that maybe didn't exist before too. Like my
Yeah.
parents have shared like a lot of opportunities they've had just to share with their coworkers because people ask questions or are expressing fear more.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Yeah.
even like literally being faithful to pray.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
One thing that we talked about yesterday is we really feel convicted to step up our prayer game right now.
Yeah.
And like, you know,
too.
both of us, our habit is to pretty much just pray in the morning, and then Rachel during her walk, and like that's it. And so like one thing I did is I put on the calendar at 2 p.m. for every day, pray. And man, I've missed that appointment a lot, but it's on there, you know, and and I'm some days I'm doing it. And then we just added yesterday praying before bed. And, you know, we don't typically do that. I think it'd be good to do when things are normal, but like, I think especially right now, I mean, goodness gracious, the world needs our prayer. People need our prayer. Our grandparents need our prayer. And our prayer has so much power.
And it's that you're submitting when you pray too. Like it's like you're claiming those truths that you talked about earlier, Richie. Like I'm admitting that I cannot hold these things.
Right.
Here you go, Lord. You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well said.
Yeah.
Adam, do you have any fatherly advice to leave us with today?
Oh my gosh, I'm not.
The
problem is I'm not
people
a
know
father.
he's not a father, right? Okay.
But you are though. You're a dad.
He is.
Can I just
dad.
comment on one thing?
What's that?
This whole video, you've been leaning back, so it makes my head look huge and yours look really
I'm sorry,
tiny.
I didn't mean to. You have a perfectly sized head.
Just
I
now
love
that you're
it.
a
Yeah.
little bit
I
more
love it.
next to me, I'm realizing that's what the problem was.
Okay.
Nobody's head is as big as mine, which is unfortunate for me.
I love your big head. It's
Thank
like my
you.
favorite thing about you.
Thank you. My fatherly advice is every day you're gonna have fun and be safe, and if you can't be safe, have fun. That's what
Beautiful.
I say.
Great advice.
Is that great advice for right now?
I don't know.
No, it's not.
Not applicable.
No, but it's something
No.
a dad would say.
It is
Yes.
something that I would say.
So there you go.
You should start a separate blog of Corona dad jokes.
Yeah.
Corona dad jokes. All right, guys. Be safe. We love you. Wash your hands. And
You wash your hands.
Are you telling
And
us that you
shower.
love us or your listeners?
Well, originally I was telling the listeners, but actually, I mean, it's something I would say to you too. I do love you, and I do want you to wash your hands.
too.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll see you next time.
See you
Okay,
next time. Bye,
bye.
guys.